What's up, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of the Well Man's Podcast. My name is Brian Brosey. I'm joined by my friend and co-host, Dr. Keoni Tita. Keoni, how are you today?
Doing wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for listening once again. And
Hopefully.
yeah, hopefully, yes. Thank you for, like Brian and I, wanting to expand your knowledge. And we appreciate you guys listening to it and your feedback to help us do that.
Yeah, we heard about the tea in the COVID vaccine episode. So we'll stop drinking tea and stirring the tea. We got a lot of feedback, Keoni.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, we should talk about that briefly because I just got my my first dose and I'm up for my of the Pfizer vaccine. I'm up for my second vaccination on February 6th. I didn't experience any negative side effects. I got a little arm soreness like the next day, but it was really like lasted no more than a few hours for me. I would say at the most 6 hours.
Okay.
You know, from the first one, I hear the second one, we can let people know, but I heard the second one may give you a little bit more of an immune response.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that as well.
Yeah. So anyway, and that's not a bad thing. That's just, it's just showing that your immune system is responding to the vaccine. So you're building up. You can think about it as building up immunity.
Yeah. Well, can we talk a little bit about why we would have that response? Because we did talk about in the COVID vaccine episode about it being mRNA. So you're not getting that live virus. So What is it that still causes you to feel possibly a little, like you're dealing with something?
Yeah. So basically, you get that mRNA vaccine. Your cells, specifically, I think it's the dendritic cells, take up that little piece of mRNA, and then it uses your cellular machinery within the cytoplasm of the cell to create a portion of spike protein. Yep. And now that spike protein is presented via these cells. They're also known dendritic or antigen presenting cells, right? So they present this portion of spike protein to your other immune cells, and to let the immune cells know that it is foreign. So for your cells to really get the message that it is foreign, they upregulate your immune system. And you may at times feel, when that's going on, maybe slightly chilled, maybe slightly feverish, maybe really fatigued. I haven't heard of anybody who got after the second dose couldn't get through their day, but I've heard a lot of people like wanting to go to, they were just tired as their body is being presented with this spike protein. And all it is the body's just getting used to the message of, this is a foreign material, remember it so that when we're confronted with the real thing, the virus, we can mount an immune response. Mm-hmm. So you're really, you're not getting COVID by any, you're not getting COVID at all. It's impossible with this vaccine, but you are getting you may get an immune response. Now, some people don't feel anything, and that doesn't mean you're not getting an immune response, but, the theory goes, if you have like fever or chills or not even that, like you just don't feel right after the second dose or even the first dose,
right?
It just means your body is, getting the message, so to speak, to build up antibodies and immunity.
Yeah.
So I tell my patients, don't, that's to be expected, and it's not anything to worry about. So, so what was your experience with it? Did you have any issues with the first dose?
Yeah. So I ended up getting vaccinated, unlike we talked about on the podcast. So I credit our conversation to helping me kind of make that decision quite a bit.
Very good.
Quite a bit. And then some selfish reasons I didn't want to get it, obviously, and pass it along.
Yeah.
So I got the first dose, I think it was last Wednesday, and I had a super sore arm, I must admit. Super sore arm for
How sore was it? Because I've heard some people can't even lift their arm up.
I could lift my arm, but it was sore, Keoni. I mean, it was sore.
I had very little soreness. Okay.
Significantly sore, but that was it. That was all I felt, and that soreness probably stayed with me for like 36 hours max, maybe. Mm-hmm. And that was it. A little bit of soreness. Now, just like you have alluded to, and I've had a few patients ask me about this, I've seen the second dose, people have a little bit stronger of a response. or kind of feel a little bit more like they're dealing with it, like we were just talking about a little bit more.
Yep.
But I've heard everything from absolutely nothing to, not going to work the next day just because they didn't feel very well after the second dose. But after the first dose, I've heard everyone, maybe they have a sore arm, maybe they have a headache. Other than that, nothing to be too concerned about.
Right.
So I just had the sore arm, and that was it.
Okay. Well, yeah. So, the whole reason why with these vaccines, like, some people, they say after the first shot, you get a little bit of immunity, but the second shot really gets you up to that 95% immunity. You probably heard those numbers on the news, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean you're out of the woods. Okay. And typically right now because I get this question a lot, should people, after you get the second dose, should you still wear a mask? Well, for me and you, definitely. Being healthcare providers, obviously we should.
Yep.
But there's still a small percentage that may not be immune. So you don't want to go away thinking that you're immune to it. And then with the variants, we're still trying to work that out. Now, these mRNA vaccines, it's going to be very, very difficult. I mean, it's almost like, I don't want to say like almost impossible, but for the COVID variants or mutations to completely be immune to the vaccine would be incredible. I'm not saying it can't happen, but it's unlikely. It's unlikely to happen. So your vaccination should give you some immunity to all the variants, and indeed, that's what the infectious disease specialists are saying.
Well, that's what's interesting that I've heard on the news, Keoni, is just different percentages of, for instance, the Pfizer versus Moderna, and now the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, and also after the first dose, that it gives you, a 78% chance, or I'm making up numbers, against, a serious bout of COVID.
Right.
So
that's what Johnson & Johnson.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so is it just now that you've built those spike proteins, you have a little bit more of awareness of how to deal with it, but you can still get it. It's just not as severe. And then my second question for you is, why a second dose at all?
Again, it goes back to making sure that your body has gotten the message so that you can build the antibodies and have at least partial immunity.
Right.
Okay. So you brought up the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, and we should probably do a whole podcast on it, but the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is not an mRNA vaccine. It works by a similar mechanism, but it's actually DNA. And the reason why, and the nice thing about this vaccine, if it gets approved, is because it only requires one shot. Okay. Now, I think they are looking into a second booster shot, but with one shot, you seem to get like 60% immunity. But the nice thing about the one shot is people are going to be more compliant, right? You don't need to, like, I have to keep my date for February 6th to get there. I mean, what if something comes up, that I just can't get there, or people forget, which is going to happen. So a lot of people may not get their second shot of the Pfizer or Moderna. So the reason why one shot with the Johnson & Johnson is really good. And it uses a different mechanism to get into the cell. So with mRNA vaccine, it's like kind of packaged in like this, like a lipophilic molecule. So like a fat loving molecule that can get into the
basically
cell.
The cell membrane. The outer case is a fat.
Right. It can get into the cell membrane, and then in the cytoplasm, it can do its thing. From my understanding with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, it's actually packaged in the adenovirus shell, right? So the adenovirus is a common cold virus, but they've actually taken out, from what I understand, the actual infectious agent of that. They're just using the shell of the virus to actually be something that delivers the spike protein to your cell. So a virus now will attach to the cell wall, and then it will put in that spike protein. And this is the other where it's different. We were talking about Pfizer, Moderna being mRNA. This is actually DNA code. So this DNA actually will go into the cell. And this is where it's confusing for me. So we may want to do another thing, but it will get into the cell. And I think it may even go into the cell nucleus, to where the cell nucleus will now make the spike protein from the DNA. All right. I think it like can use the machinery of your DNA somehow, because it's a DNA spike protein. It's not mRNA from what I understand. However, this type of delivery mechanism doesn't require, it being frozen and making sure that you thaw it appropriately and so on, like the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines do. So this is a pretty neat delivery mechanism, and it's not an unheard of delivery mechanism. Again, with this vaccine, it's impossible to get coronavirus with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. It's just impossible. So,
and it's impossible because of why is it so much more impossible or more effective, I guess, Keoni, than the other two?
Well, it depends on what you're saying. It's impossible for one, because you're just doing the spike protein. You don't have the whole
I'm
genetic.
sorry. You mean from getting it from the vaccine? Yeah.
So the spike, that adenovirus vector that's delivering the spike protein, that's, like a regular adenovirus, when it infects you, it delivers its genetic code into your cells so it can make more adenovirus and then go out. So we're using the adenovirus shell, right, to get into cell, deliver the spike protein, your cellular machinery. I don't know all the details of how that works, but it's DNA. So it uses your cellular machinery to read the DNA code, not mRNA like Pfizer and Moderna. And therefore it creates spike protein, and that spike protein is now presented to the immune system. So the immune system can create antibodies and give you an immune response. Now, the reason why it doesn't need to be frozen is because we have a shell, that adenovirus shell, that's acting as the carrier, not a lipophilic molecule that needs to be frozen and thawed out right before you give it, right? So it doesn't degrade as readily.
Okay.
Now, as far as effectiveness goes, with 2 shots of Moderna and Pfizer, we're talking about 90 to 95% efficacy. With 1 shot of the Johnson & Johnson, it seems to be about 60%, although that varies with the different coronavirus variants, but it does give you some protection. But I think the main thing that people are really thrilled about with this vaccine, from what my understanding, is that it has like a really high efficacy of keeping people from getting serious illness, right? So you can still have it, and maybe you're that 40% where you didn't get the full immunity, but you seem to get it, but you don't get seriously ill.
Right.
And so that's pretty good. So
it's life-saving.
Yeah. So it's life-saving. And so the benefits are 1 shot. So people are going to be more compliant. You don't need to freeze it, and it keeps you from getting significantly ill, which is great. I don't know if we have studies on the 5% who, maybe got vaccinated but still got coronavirus anyway.
Right.
I don't know if we know. I would think it would still. I would think that would still keep you from getting seriously ill, because I would think you would still have some immune response. But that's kind of gist of it from my understanding. And of course, me and you, what are we? We're clinicians. We're certainly not the infectious disease specialists. But that's my understanding of it. And it's impossible to get coronavirus from any of these three vaccines.
Yeah. Keoni, just a couple common questions I've gotten from patients. What would you recommend for patients that are immunocompromised? Should they be rushing to get the vaccine? Should they be waiting to get the vaccine? Let's say someone had cancer previously, went through cancer treatment. At that point, this to me at this point seems relatively safe. Both of them, or all 3 of them, I guess. The mechanism.
Yeah, absolutely. As far as I know, of course, they need to talk to their doctor or the healthcare provider,
Absolutely.
given that. But when I went for my vaccination, I mean, the main questions are you allergic to any known things? Have you ever had an allergic reaction to any vaccines? Based on the ingredient list, which the ingredient list in at least the Pfizer and Moderna, there's not a whole lot in there to be allergic to. We talked about PEG, polyethylene glycol. Some people get allergic reaction to that. There may be some other things, but it's certainly not like more of the conventional vaccines where you have these adjuvants in there that people may be allergic to. Right. But really, you really have to worry about mainly allergic reactions. And that's why when you get they probably did this to you, right? When you got your vaccination, they probably had you sit there for 10 to 15 minutes before they let you go. Is that correct? What do they do? They just jab you in the car and tell you to leave?
I was at work, so they jabbed me and said, get back to work.
Okay.
Come back if you're feeling swelly.
All right. Well, at least you stayed in the building in case you fell out.
Correct.
Okay. Well, so let's think about this. So I think I think where are we in the United States? I think I could be wrong on this, but I think we've dispensed 25 million doses of the vaccine so far in the U.S. population. I think I heard that correct, and it's much higher worldwide, right? Yeah. Anyway, very few negative reactions from these vaccines so far. So, I mean, there may be some allergic stuff, but yes, people who are immunocompromised, I think that it'd be good to get it because, if you get the actual virus and being immunocompromised, and your body has to deal with the natural virus, that could be devastating for you.
Right.
Absolutely. So even the elderly tend to be immunocompromised. Those are people that should be vaccinated. They really should, unless their doctor tells them something different.
Yeah, and just speaking on that, obviously, I do have a position at a skilled nursing facility, and I've seen residents get vaccinated, be fine. Obviously, these are elderly. These are very elderly sometimes at that point, and I've seen that just go down just fine.
Yeah.
Now, one other thing I do want to ask you about while we're still on the topic is you keep saying DNA, and if my Alex Jones brain goes, oh God, DNA, talk to me a little bit about how safe what the difference is. Where, people think that when we're getting this DNA vaccine, it's somehow adjusting our DNA and playing a role in kind of changing our genetic makeup. Is that the case? It doesn't seem like that's the case. Can you just kind of quell the anxieties regarding that a little?
Okay, there's no evidence of of any vaccines manipulating your DNA or changing your DNA.
I'm sorry.
I mean, there's just but it's a good question, right? Because it is one of the things that we brought up. It's a good question. We brought it up in our last podcast on, well, this is an mRNA vaccine. Can that get incorporated into your DNA? Well, no, it's RNA, right? So that's one reason. And the other reason it's using your cellular machinery in the cytoplasm to be read. So if it's DNA, if I'm not mistaken, again, this is where I'm off on. I mean, I listened to a couple people on NPR and disease specialists who talked about it. And, I couldn't get the details of the mechanism of it. But if it's DNA, it seems like it will get into the nucleus and use the nuclear machinery to create the spike protein, right? Or to get read at least.
Right.
But to get incorporated into your DNA and forever be there and then make you grow a third eye out of your forehead or whatever, no. I mean, that's just not going to happen. Typically with these vaccines, your cellular machinery uses it to make the spike protein, and then it gets degraded down into its component parts and gets recycled back somewhere else. It's fascinating how cells do that. Like everything that comes in there, they use what they need and then they take things apart and put it wherever else it's needed. It's like one of the most efficient recycling things you can do, but getting incorporated into your DNA, it takes a lot of, to do that, it takes a lot more than I could even understand, but you have to be able to get incorporated in your DNA. You have to somehow splice the DNA, put it in there, make sure that it has a signal to get read and unread. And this is something I think we've talked about before, where now we're getting into like the CRISPR technologies where you can actually do that.
Yeah.
So I based on my understanding how this vaccine works, that is almost impossible. I mean, I don't know, but I'm not the expert on it.
Right.
So,
but it definitely helps, kind of clear that up. And it is one of those talking points that you hear from the other side, or just the side against this situation.
Well, yeah. And I don't, I think it's a good question. It's especially a good question when you don't understand how these things work. You know, I mean, you hear DNA or RNA vaccines and you're thinking, oh my God, what are they doing? They're changing me into I don't know, something else. But really what they are doing is they're changing you into being more immune without affecting your genetic code.
Right. Yeah, you're essentially, I mean, you're getting the playbook for the other team. You're getting ready for the game. You're getting the playbook of how this other team is going to attack you. And you know how to run the defense against whatever offense they plan on running. And that's what
right. And you're not becoming the other team. You're getting the playbook, but you're not becoming the other team. So you're not getting that other team's players and pulling them over to your team to do what they want to do. That's what a virus does. That's what this coronavirus does. I mean, it kind of takes on your cellular genetic makeup and makes you part of their team to destroy your body. You know, so and that's the way viruses work. That's a question people ask. Well, that doesn't make any sense from an evolutionary perspective, does it? I mean, at first thought, why would a virus go attack you and kill your body so that it can't reproduce? Well, the life cycle of the virus is it wants to reproduce so much so that it can move on to somebody else. So it's using you as a vector to move on.
Right.
It doesn't want to, it wants you to stay alive as long as it can so it can reproduce.
Right.
And get out there and infect other people.
So get your defense up. Blitz the virus.
Right. But I mean, as I understand more about this Johnson & Johnson vaccine, and it's not authorized yet. It may be real soon. If it does come to fruition that it's going to be in use, we'll talk about it more.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to do another one. So as of right now, Keoni, no one's received the Johnson & Johnson?
No,
only heard about it.
No, only people in the studies. Nobody, it hasn't been authorized for use yet. And we can talk about other vaccines and different mechanisms. Like Russia has a vaccine that has a different mechanism. I think India has a vaccine and China has another, that they're all using different mechanisms to help your body create antibodies. So we can talk about those different mechanisms.
Yeah, we should definitely do a podcast on it. Anything else kind of regarding the vaccines?
No, I mean, I think it's important for us to, kind of help everybody out. I mean, that's the way I look at it. Like it's, I want to do it because I certainly don't want to live with the fact of me, infecting somebody else. And
just like you said, in the position, being healthcare providers, dealing with a compromised individual possibly. And even selfishly, I don't want to stop working for 14 days.
Well, and that, and you know what, so that kind of brings us into our next topic, but I do want to say this. Absolutely. I run my clinic by myself pretty much. I mean, I have other people there and I have front desk there, but if I'm not there, I mean, the clinic shuts down.
Right.
The income potential for that clinic goes way, way down. Right. Because basically I act like a landlord for the other practitioners there. It's the core clinic for me is me, Jillian, and Melissa, my front desk person, and Jillian's, my wife and fellow physician there. We're the core of the clinic. The other practitioners there are basically they rent space from us and run their practices out of there. And I can't depend on their monthly rent or however they're paying the clinic back to support the clinic. I have to be there.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely selfish reasons for me getting that. And the other selfish reasons, hell, I want to spend time with my family without having to worry about them getting infected. I want to see my parents. I haven't, I've seen them, but it's like I see them at a distance and I'm all, basically I feel like I'm in an astronaut suit when I see them. I got to put my mask on, and keep distance from them. My parents are in their 70s, so they're in a higher risk group than I am.
Absolutely. I do want to ask you what Jillian's response is, and then or response was, if she did get it, and then
she got it.
She did.
Yeah.
I want you to tell me about her response, but I got to say, just based off you saying you feel like an astronaut, if I was going to, so typically for some reason I was watching the Challenger documentary on Netflix over the weekend, and for some reason, like all the space shuttle programs, they always sent like 7 people up. That was the number that kept coming out.
Yeah.
Keoni, you would definitely be one of my 7 on the space shuttle. No doubt about it. No
Really?
doubt about it. Yeah. Oh my God. I'm going to need you on that space shuttle.
Oh, please. Oh my God. I wouldn't get on those space shuttle. We should do podcasts on that. Those people are amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. But tell me a little bit about Jillian's response.
So her response was nothing, pretty much. She didn't feel anything. She didn't even get the arm soreness. That was that. So, okay. I mean, she had a much better response than me and you. She didn't really feel, and better is relative, right? I don't know what's a better response. She didn't, there's nothing for her.
Yeah. Awesome.
My brother-in-law, he got the Moderna vaccine, and, he had arm soreness the first time. The second dose, he just felt a little bit off for like a day, but nothing. It's not like he couldn't work or do what he wanted to do. He did say one of his partners that works with him, he's the EMS, felt like he got a little bit of fever and chills after the second one, and felt like they wanted to sleep the next day. But other than that, I mean, that's what I hear. And then my other colleagues that I know of, friends from medical school and stuff, many of them got their second dose, and just some slight, fatigue maybe at the second one, and it's very transient.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. Well, we'll definitely have to do another one on some more Johnson & Johnson. We'll have to kind of talk about, when we talk about that one, we'll talk about our second doses. I think I'm slated for February 17th.
Okay. Now, so we should talk about after that.
Before we change gears, if I don't go get the second dose, Keoni, am I at risk for anything other than not getting the full degree of immunity that I was hoping to get from the vaccine? From what we know?
Not that I know. And you have partial immunity.
Yeah.
But we don't know. I mean, and your immunity may not last as long. Right?
Yep.
So I think it's important to get the second dose, especially because I think we have an idea of how long at least that it will last. I think up to like 3 to 6 months. I mean, again, these are new, so we don't know. Like we are kind of the experiment to see how long immunity will last.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to get the second dose because it will help us as a society to reach herd immunity quicker.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So.
Okay. All right. Well, Keoni, I think we should call an audible, and we'll close this episode out and just start again for our next episode that we were talking about going into. So,
all right,
everyone,
great.
If you want to hear what we were talking about, what we were alluding to, tune in next week.
All right, great. Take care, everybody. Thanks.
Be well.